Stories from Real Life is a production of Media Well Done, LLC.
Welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. We often talk about people with disabilities through the lens of what they lack or what needs to be fixed. But what happens when you stop looking for a cure and start looking at the person? Today's guest is Dr. Stuart Jones, author of For the Love of Stephen. He's telling the story of his brother, a man who the experts said would never thrive, but who ended up teaching an entire community about the true meaning of wholeness. It's a conversation about advocacy, family, and the radical idea that no human being is ever broken. This is Stories from Real Life, and today's story is Stuart Jones's For the Love of Stephen.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to episode 198 of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thank you for joining me for the podcast where our real stories are so much more interesting than fiction. Like this one. Dr. Stuart D. Jones is an author and advocate who has turned a lifetime of personal experience into a powerful message of inclusion. His memoir, For the Love of Stephen, chronicles the life of his brother, who lived with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Dr. Jones, welcome to Stories from Real Life.
Oh, gosh, it's my pleasure. I thank you so much for having me. And again, I got to say it, congratulations on your American Writing Award as the top male-hosted podcast. You are somebody. Let me affirm you. Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to play this back for my family so they can know I am somebody.
Yeah. You've always known it. They just need to claim it too.
It's time they recognize here.
Absolutely.
So I've got a lot of questions for you. But before we begin, I'd just like for you to tell us a little bit about your brother, Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen was a very special sibling to me. Of course, he was to the entire family, my other brother, Scott, and sister, Susan. But for me, Steve was my best friend and closest playmate growing up. I mean, I know there was an 8-year gap between us. Steve's the oldest, I'm the youngest, and I have another brother and sister in the middle. But to tell you about Steve, from a childlike view, Steve was so kind-hearted, so generous, always giving, did not have, I kid you not, did not have a mean bone in his body, unless you tried really hard to bring it out. But he was my best. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody's got buttons if you push hard enough, right? Or push the right button. Steve was just a wonderful playmate to me, which is why he was so dear to me, why I felt compelled to write this book. Because as my mother, I guess, said it perhaps best, she said, Stuart, growing up, of course, you were a child, and Steve always had the mind of a child. So, anytime I wanted to play or go outside, it didn't matter what I wanted to do, Steve was all in. He was, and not just that, but kind of my bodyguard. I tell a couple stories in the book about how, we fought hard to protect Steve from bullies, but he protected me a couple times from bullies as well. It was a very close relationship. So even after he died, which I realized he was tragically killed some 20 years ago, I've wanted to write this book. The book, in terms of the time period, was, 70 years and 50 and 60 and 70 years ago, but still relevant today. The message still important today, regardless of the time span of Stephen's life. But anybody would describe him, Mel, as very giving to a fault. Sometimes that generosity got him in trouble because he couldn't always discern good people from bad people. And there were bad people that took advantage of him. But he just was a man of faith. His faith in Christ and God was very important to him, even though he forever had the mind of an 11 or 12-year-old. Faith was important. Kindness was important. Inclusion was important. Those were things he kind of had to fight for, was belonging and being seen, because the world didn't always treat him kindly.
That's interesting. So you spent a lifetime in academia and advocacy, but this story for you is personal. So why was now the right time to bring Stephen's story to the world?
Yeah, I wish I had a really profound reason to give you and the listeners today. To be honest, now was the right time because I retired 3 years ago. I
That
have
makes sense.
wanted to write this book. It took retirement. Everybody has, sometimes people have very demanding jobs. As a vice president at universities and colleges, worked a lot of hours, as many people do. I just didn't have the time to devote to sit down and write his story. Retirement gave me that opportunity. So I'm glad that I finally did. And as I don't mean to repeat myself, I'm very glad too that so many people have said, Stuart, yeah, this happened many years ago, but the message is so on point for today and highly relevant for today. That makes me feel good because I didn't want this to be a history book of something long ago. It is a beautiful story of many years ago, but still carries messages we must hear, respond to today. So that's why I finally sat down and wrote the book. And it was my first book, and the book journey, you as an author too, Mel, every book journey is a little bit different. And this was a joy for me to write. Not always easy, and sometimes quite painful emotionally, but still a joy for me to put it together. Mel, I sometimes refer to putting the book together as a puzzle. Stephen's life had many chapters. And within Stephen's life, there's a lot of context about understanding disability and the laws around those who are disabled, trying to help and protect. Social commentary. Couldn't help myself, had to throw some social commentary in there. But it became like this puzzle that I had to put together in a correct order of things for the reader to enjoy the story, be moved by the story, and they will be challenged by the story, and be challenged to think differently. But also, because I'm an educator, I've slipped in some educational pieces like sugar in a coffee cup so people could pick up on things and grow from the book as well. I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. So the
Good.
subtitle of your book is The Story of a Boy Who Was Never Broken. So why did you choose the word broken specifically to push back against?
Yeah. It actually was a term that my parents had heard perhaps more than once from clinicians and from people, from family members, from friends. Back in 1954, when Stephen was born, special education didn't exist. There were no services and resources for parents who had special needs children. Believe it or not, I know we've come a long way. We have a long way more to go. But for my parents who were married right out of high school, 18 years old, mom was expecting Stephen. He was born premature. The term broken eventually came up by family members and doctors once they recognized in Steve's toddler years he wasn't developing like what is called neurotypical children. He wasn't developing, crawling, rolling over, speaking, standing up. And the doctor began to suspect something could be wrong. And so the terms that they used back then were, he said, I'm sorry, Keith and Phyllis, it's my parents. We think your child's retarded, slow, at least slow, and, broken in the way that he's not going to be like a typical kid. Sometimes they heard the word from others, your child has a deficit, or even cruelly, oh, that boy's defective, isn't he? The words hurt, right? They can be like a sledgehammer to the heart. My parents heard all of that. But in my opinion, why I wrote the subtitle, The Story of a Boy Who Was Never Broken, Steve was not broken. He was different. And as my friend Temple Grandin, who wrote the foreword for the book, says, different, not less. I say different, not broken. What was broken, in my opinion, Mel, I think in the opinion of millions of other caregivers, advocates, and family members. What's broken is society's ability to see this person as fully human, not broken, not weird, um, not I guess a deficit, but a fully human being who has something to offer if we'll just see them, get to know them, understand them, and give them a chance. That's always the difficult part, is allowing other human beings to move past judgment and see this as a human being whom God has made and someone who has something to contribute. Believe me, every disabled child has something to contribute, and every disabled adult now. Sorry, don't mean to preach a sermon, but there I go.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, something you said just struck a chord with me. I think one of the biggest lies that people tell themselves, or not as much now as they used to, is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And as a writer, someone who's written literally millions of words absolutely can hurt you. I can as a writer, I can make you cry. I can make you laugh out loud. I can make you think about something just by putting words on a page. You may never meet me, and I can make you feel those emotions. So obviously words can have a physical response. And one of those responses can be hurt. And I don't know why people think saying whatever they want and it's just words won't do anything, because it can be generational.
Yeah, I devote a whole chapter to that, called The Terms and Words That Tried to Define Steve, that didn't define Steve. And as I dug into history, because of academics, I'm a researcher, but even I was shocked and appalled by the words that were used to describe special needs children. Again, I understand there was a different day and a time back in the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s, but they used words. Doctors, researchers, clinicians used words like imbecile, moron. They used the word dumb, slow, mentally retarded. And even words like, this child has a deficit. Well, does the child have a deficit, or do we have an inability to see the worth of that human being? That's usually what's broken in our society. But those words were clinical words. I understand that. Forgiveness can be passed on to them. But those words still hurt, as you're pointing out, Mel, today, if we're still using them. And I grew up, and my siblings grew up hearing those words from cruel people, not just other children. We heard them from teachers at school. We heard them from people in church. We heard them from other adults who were friends of the family. Again, people did not know the right vernacular, I guess, the right terminology. But yeah, you're right. Words can hurt. And as I say in the chapter, they can be about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face when it comes to families caring for and providing for their disabled sibling or child. So I do want people to be careful with their words. I do. And even recently, not to get politically, but even recently, the word retarded has come back up to the surface because certain high-profile people have used it. And it's created a whole nother online discussion, because I'm a part of, about 70 different advocacy groups online. I am. You think I don't have a life. But I'm involved, and my goodness, that stirred the pot, and I'm glad it did in one way, because we're trying to teach society that word is not accurate, it does not fit, and when you subscribe words to an individual like that, you automatically stigmatize them, and you lower everyone's expectation of them when you basically refer to them as less than, when they're not. They're different, and we're all different. Mel, you're different. Maybe
I'm very different. I'm very different.
I know. Everybody that knows me is going to tell you I'm really different. We're all different, but thank God that we were created that way. But being able to understand the difference. And some people, when it comes to seeing those who are disabled, just don't want to take the time to move past judgment and stigmatization and get to know them. That's where I think I tend to wave the flag, the banner of freedom for those who are disabled. I'm trying to say, folks, we have an innate human problem. We judge, we categorize, we label, and none of those things are worthwhile when it comes to seeing another human being. As I said in one thing, labels belong on jars, not on people. No label.
Man, you can get me riled up here on that subject. So I'm just going to go on to the next question because I don't want to go on a rant because this isn't about me.
No, go ahead. I love a rant.
I'll pass this time. We'll talk about it offline. So you mentioned how young your parents were when Stephen was born, and they made a radical choice for that time for Stephen to stay at home rather than being institutionalized. What did that kind of courage cost them, and what did it give to your family?
What it has cost them, I know they would say this, and what it has cost us as siblings is blessings. Although we didn't recognize it at the time, it felt more like challenges. And I'm sure to my parents at times it felt like a burden. Any parent or sibling trying to help raise a special needs child is going to have days of tremendous joy and blessing, and days where you think you're messing it up, days where you feel discouraged, you feel lonely and helpless. It's a roller coaster of emotions. And it was for my parents. You know, one of the reasons I was proud to write the book is because of my parents. They made a radical choice that was not made by most people in 1954. Another family doctor told them, and my father's mother, Stephen's grandmother, told them, put him in an institution. That's what they did with kids back then. Put him in a home, a state hospital, which was usually reserved for people who had severe challenges, or people who were clinically insane. Steve didn't belong in a state hospital. When my parents were given that recommendation, they snarled a bit and they said immediately, through gut instinct and because of their heart, said no. They didn't even think about it, which makes me so proud of them. They didn't consider it. They didn't think about it for a minute, even though that conversation kept coming around. Well, maybe Steve would be better off in a state home with other people that are kind of like him. Well, no one's like Steve because we're all uniquely different. He didn't belong in a state home. And I'm sorry to say, and this is the truth of the book, at that time, many of the state homes were simply warehouses for the infirm. They didn't teach them anything. There wasn't anything constructive and good going on. I can't even imagine my brother being there. My parents at age 18, heck, they were still trying to become adults themselves, said, no. We love this child. It's our firstborn child. We're going to try to figure this out and raise him the best we can. And if I can tell you a quick story that I think is pivotal in the book, it was pivotal to my parents. My parents at first kept hearing, of course, from everybody who had any experience with a special needs child, all the doom and gloom, right? You'll probably never be able to go to school. Probably won't learn to talk well, or if at all. Probably won't have motor skills. Good luck if he ever rides a bike or can hold a ball or throw one. You know, good luck. You probably ought to just keep him at home. And those were the choices. You either put him in an institution back then or you hide them in your house. One summer in Steve's early childhood, probably age 3 or so, we had an aunt, my mother's sister, who was determined, God bless her, determined to teach Steve to pedal a tricycle because my parents were told he'll never be able to do those kinds of things. She literally worked with him every day. I don't know how many days or weeks it took. My parents said Aunt Betty did it every day for many, many days. Finally, Steve started pedaling, and she screamed at my parents to come outside from their little house. And my parents acted like he had won the Tour de France. It was a moment of jubilation, but even more than that, my parents describe it as a moment in which they changed their entire thinking from what can't he do to what can he do? If Steve can do this, and the experts said he probably can't, what else can he do? And my parents chose not gloom and doom. They took a path of hope. And that made all the difference, I think, in Stephen's life. My parents refused to let Steve be hidden away. They chose to put him into society. There were no special education Boy Scout troops, but he joined Boy Scouts with all the other neurotypical kids. He joined 4-H. He joined the high school chess team. He joined the church choir, and he couldn't sing. Oh, my Lord. He was making a joyful noise and only God could understand. But my parents didn't care. They were like, what can Steve do? By golly, we're not going to treat him different. We're going to treat him like our other 3 kids that we have, and we're going to let Steve live the fullest life he can. My gosh, that took courage and perseverance. They refused to be ashamed or embarrassed of their special needs child, and they put him out there. And that's my advice to parents today. I know there's all kinds of spectrums, whether it's autism, Asperger's, intellectual disabilities. You're never going to know what your child can do unless you let them try. Don't hide them. And as my mother says, you don't have to believe everything a doctor tells you. You don't. You know your child better than anybody. Listen to your heart, she says. Listen to your instincts. Don't be afraid to try, and let them try. And that made all the difference a long time ago. It makes all the difference, I think, still today.
That's awesome. So in your writing, you don't shy away from the hard parts, including the bullying that you mentioned and the stares. So how did those moments of cruelty shape your own sense of justice?
Yeah, good question, Mel. My sense of justice was to whack somebody upside the head who was picking on Steve, but that's my Irish temper coming out. It's funny, Mel, that you say that, because as I interviewed my mother and father for this book, hours after hours, I learned stories of Stephen's abuse at the hands of others that they had never told me, and never told my other brother and sister. Some things were hidden from us as siblings. I said, Dad, Mom, why didn't I know about this? And they said, because we know you would have killed these people. I said, well, maybe not kill, but there would have been a beatdown going on somewhere. There would have been righteous justice dispensed on some certain human beings. But, Mel, that was hard, because even as a child growing up, I didn't see Stephen at first as having special needs. I eventually began to identify things as we grew up together. And unfortunately, I began to identify that he was different because he started being bullied everywhere we went. I mean, Steve looked different. I understand that, right? And we're so quick to judge. Steve looked different. He spoke differently with a unique cadence that only we as a family could understand. Steve was different. And people would identify that quickly. And some would just start making fun. I mean, the school days were tough for me and my other brother and sister, because, we had to let Steve go to his school. But at times when we were with Steve on the playground or at the swimming pool, the community swimming pool, we saw kids laughing, and they weren't even shy about calling him names. Those things began to really bother us. And we found ourselves, as I say in the book, becoming the defenders of Steve, not physically, although I got into a couple little skirmishes that the book talks about. I did. I had to. A couple times. I had to defend him. But, that was hard growing up, and it hurt my heart because I knew that I loved Steve, and I didn't understand as a child or even as a teenager I didn't understand, why can't people be nice? It seems so simple. It's the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. It's so simple, but so hard for so many people, children, teens, or adults, to do that. Because again, human nature, as I talk about in the book, we're afraid of what we don't understand. We're afraid of somebody who looks different, acts different. And we tend to respond to that with cruelty rather than with trying to understand and sympathize or empathize or give them the benefit of the doubt. And there were people, Mel, please don't misunderstand me. There were some champions in Stephen's life that were blessings to him and to us. People that got it, that saw him as a human being and nothing but a creation of God. But there were others. And there are 2 chapters, as you allude to in the book, called The Vultures That Circle. And they were vultures that circled Steve. And when they had opportunities to swoon down and take advantage of his goodness and his kindness, they did. And he was hurt financially. He was hurt emotionally. He was hurt physically. He was physically abused at times by others that we would find out about later. And it was hard to see that kind of cruelty. But what is so beautiful about Stephen's spirit, he never held a grudge. Even his first disastrous marriage with a lady that just took full advantage of him and left him broke, right? It was terrible. But Steve never held a grudge. I don't think he knew how to hold a grudge against another human being. He just was kind. He was just kind. And that was something that was amazing to me that I wish I could still emulate, is the ability to not be hard on people who are cruel and mean. You got to forgive them anyway. And Steve taught me that. You got to forgive them. You can't whine about it. And you just got to keep moving on. And that was life lessons for me. Steve taught me many life lessons.
Nice. So he lived to be 50 years old.
Yeah.
Far outlasting many predictions. So what do you attribute his resilience to?
Yeah. That's a lovely question that I haven't been asked before, and I love it. His resiliency, I think, came from the models of my parents and us siblings. At least my father, I know, would say that quickly. Steve's ability to persist and try and work came from all of us, because that's kind of who my family is. We are just, as I mentioned to you prior to the show, and I know you can relate to this, I come from a long line of farmers. And there's no sitting around. If you're a farmer or a farmer's kid or a farmer's grandkid, you work, right? And you work till the job's done. And you do the job right. I will tell you how my grandfather used to phrase that, but he you didn't do anything half, you know what? You did things to the best of your ability, and you persisted until you got it done. That's the way we were raised, Mel. That's how Steve was raised. My parents did not coddle him. They did not treat him differently in terms of rewards or punishment, lessons or whatever than they did the rest of us. Steve was one of us, right? And so Steve learned hard work. We had chores to do. And so Steve's persistence, I think, came from just the way we were raised. And also I think, he had good caregivers too. When it comes to my mother, who was forever the nutritionist in our family, eating healthy, eating that stuff on your plate, whether you wanted to or not, you had to eat it because it's good for you. So I think, honestly, a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle, a Christian faith, and a belief in other people's innate goodness carried Steve for many, many, many years until it didn't anymore. And not to be a spoiler, but the book kind of has a spoiler in it. I do like to point out that the journey that Stephen had in his life to be seen. All Stephen wanted is to belong, to be treated kindly, and to be seen and included. That's all he wanted, really. But what was so ironic in his death was a car driver who didn't see Steve, who hit him with his car when Steve was riding his bike to work. Steve was not able to drive. He just couldn't do it cognitively. He hit Steve, knocked him down, and almost killed him instantly. But there was enough time left in Steve's life, as the book shares from the beginning, that I was able to get home and spend quality time with Steve at the hospital. I know many would say he didn't know I was there, but he knew I was there. He knew I was there. And my brother and all of us were there. And at least I got to have that time. But trying and fighting to be seen, and ultimately the irony of not being seen, that took his life.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry for your loss. I know it's been a while, but you never get past. You never get over that.
You don't, Mel, because even as I wrote the book, I can't tell you how many times I ended up in tears, right? I just did, because grief, as I say in the book, grief does not have an expiration date. I don't care how many people keep saying, oh, you should be over that by now. Come on, that was 20 years ago. No, when you love somebody that hard and they're that close to you, you never forget about them, and you never forget the love and also the grief that comes with loving, that hard. There was one moment as I was doing the audio recording of the book, and the book's on audio tape as well. And I love that people enjoy listening. Although, if you want me in your head for 8 hours reading to you, that's dangerous. But anyway, so if you want me in your head, buy the audio book. But at one point in the audio book, doggone it, I did such a good job reading it until I got to the end and I lost it. And the audio engineer also happens to be a Christian man. I looked over as I'm crying. He was crying. And he got up and he brought me his box of Kleenex, which was sitting there, and he hugged me. We hardly even know each other. We had this moment of understanding grief and what it does to you. So after I pulled myself together, I finished reading and recording the book.
Wow. Yeah, one of the things I've learned, one of the hardest lessons of life, because I lost both my parents when I was pretty young.
No, I'm sorry.
The grief is the payment for love.
Mm-hmm.
It's the expense for love. The more you love somebody, the more you grieve, and the longer you grieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was a hard lesson. When I wrote my second book, it was about the male line in my family, the Edwards line, and I talked about my dad. And the book actually starts with my dad's turning point in his life when he was 10 years old, when he confronted his very abusive father, and decided as a 10-year-old that he was going to kill his dad. And he got his gun and loaded it and hid behind something to shoot him, and the gun jammed.
Oh, wow.
And he ran away because of that. But he made the decision. He told me this when I was very little. He died when I was 13 years old, so I was way younger than 13.
Yeah.
That was when he decided if he ever had kids, he was just going to do the opposite of whatever he had seen his dad do.
Absolutely.
And that was going to be the way he was going to raise me. And that's how he did raise me. And then I had to learn more lessons on how to raise my son. It wasn't, I learned, it wasn't just a matter of not being violent. It was a matter of being specifically, intentionally, audibly loving too. So my dad loved me, but he loved me, and he showed me love by what he did. He never said it. He just couldn't say that he loved somebody, but I know he did. And so I made the point to add on to that for my children, that just to actually say I love them.
Yeah.
So,
Our parents, you and I, are probably close in age. They come from a different generation where affection wasn't always freely given and love wasn't always spoken verbally. They just expected that you knew that you were loved. And then, we've learned that we have to be told that. And psychiatrists definitely tell us that you either follow family patterns or you choose to break them. And I appreciate what you said, Mel. You made a conscientious choice. You're going to break some of the family patterns. And me and my other brother and sister, we had to do the same thing. I won't go into those details, but we had a bit of a tough childhood growing up. And my father was raised by a very hard man, like your grandfather, very hard man. There was no hugs and no I love yous and no pats on the back to my father that you're doing a good job. No. So sometimes those family patterns just carry on in how you raise your kids, unless you choose to break that and do it differently.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't mean to get off on my story. So
No, please. I loved it.
All right.
I loved it.
You mentioned Dr. Temple Grandin earlier, and I'd like for you to tell the listeners who she is, but she praised your work for its honesty. So what did that kind of validation do for you, for somebody who's so well known in the advocacy community?
Oh, Temple Grandin is a national jewel. And if people don't know her, they need to look up Dr. Temple Grandin. She's autistic, and she's an autistic savant. And there was a movie made about her life, an HBO movie starring Claire Danes called Temple. And there's a wonderful documentary, powerful documentary made a few years ago called An Open Door. You've got to see the life of Temple Grandin to understand her genius, her compassion, her ability to educate. She is really a marvel, right? So the long story that I'll make short was I call Temple Grandin a friend now because we have conversed, and you've reminded me I need to call her again. We haven't talked in a little while. You know, I took a long shot when I was writing this book, and I got near the end. I thought, I got to get somebody other than my mother to write the foreword. Or my brother or my pastor. I got to get somebody. And I thought, I need to kind of shoot high. Why not? My wife reminded me, you're going to miss every shot you don't take, Stuart. And I thought that's absolutely profound wisdom, Terry Jones.
Your mom is Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
Or your wife is Michael Jordan?
My wife, yeah. Here's my wife quoting MJ, right? And she only watches basketball because I force her to. But anyway, but my wife said, you need to take a shot. So I did some Google researching, and I found about 8 people who are celebrity in the sense of disability advocates. They're celebrities, well known, but they're also disability advocates because of that, influence in their life in one way or another. So I wrote all of them. And I, including Temple Grandin, and I heard back from one person, Temple Grandin. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter how old you are, your heart can start racing with excitement. When I saw an email pop up in my inbox from Temple Grandin, who said, Stuart, send me the manuscript. Let me see it. Because she's very brief with words, right? Stuart, send me your manuscript. Let me look at it. I'm like, you bet. Then I got really scared, Mel. I got really scared because that's when your insecurity kicks in. You think, my manuscript's terrible. She's going to hate it.
She's going to laugh at me.
She's going to laugh at me and tell her friends and make fun of me. So I thought, all right. So I sent her the manuscript, and I waited what seemed like an eternity, but it wasn't. It was about 2 weeks. She emailed back, and she said, again, she's a woman of few words. Except when she's public speaking, she's got lots of words. But when she's writing, she just simply sent an email and she said, I will write you a blurb. And I thought, what does that mean? Does that mean you'll write a forward, or are you just writing a blurb? And so I clarified with her. She said, no, I'll write you a forward, a short forward for your book. She said, I really liked it. I thought, and then she started to talk a little bit. Then we got on the phone together, and she said, no, Stuart, it was beautifully written. And it's a love letter to your brother, and it's very educational. She said, I think it'll be this is what she said, I think it'll be a great inspiration to any parent of a child with special needs. It'll be inspirational. I said, oh my gosh, thank you. Well, when my wife got home later after I'd been on the phone with her, I must have had some kind of look on my face because she said, what happened? And I said, I just talked to Temple Grandin. on the phone. That's like, that'd be like a guy who wrote a book about baseball talking to Mickey Mantle, who's going to write the foreword for his book. You feel like you hit the lottery. And I did hit the lottery.
Yeah,
and she's been so...
You told her you scored 60 points in a playoff game, right?
That's right. I took every shot. Otherwise, I'd miss it if I didn't take it. So, Yeah, I just was just elated with joy. I knew that her endorsement of this story would carry some really important weight, and it has. And I know Stephen wasn't autistic, as Temple is, and Temple is an autistic advocate and has written many books on understanding autism. But still, cognitive challenges or intellectual disabilities comes in many forms, not just autism, as we all know, but in many forms. And Steve wasn't autistic and he wasn't Down syndrome, but he definitely was intellectually and developmentally disabled. But Temple saw in his story something that was really, as she said, beautiful, and I appreciated that. So, yes, I got her to write the foreword. And I also got, real quickly, another important person to write a second foreword for me, and that was Kim Dodson. There's an organization called the ARC USA, which is national, and it supports and advocates for intellectually disabled individuals. And they have hundreds of chapters across the United States, hundreds. You'll find it in every state. In Indiana, I connected with Kim Dodson, who's the CEO for the ARC of Indiana. Phenomenal organization. Same kind of story. She wanted to see the manuscript. I had never met her yet. She read it. She said, I would be honored to write another foreword for you. And since that time, Mel, I have met with Kim Dodson and her entire wonderful leadership team in Indianapolis, where their office is. And I've met with other ARC chapters, like the one in Lafayette, where I grew up and Steve grew up, because that ARC chapter actually was existing a long time ago in the late 1950s and early 1960s, when Steve started going to what's called the Wabash Center in Lafayette, which is now an ARC chapter. But Steve went there for a period of time. And so I've connected with them. I'm connecting tomorrow with another ARC organization. So for me, it's been a beautiful mission in terms of connecting with the people who are advocating for those who can't always advocate for themselves, and speaking up for those that can't always speak up for themselves. So that's been part of my journey too, is to get more involved and simply spread the good word about helping those that are fully human, that deserve dignity and deserve to be seen.
That's great. So how did growing up as Stephen's brother influence your career path and your approach to leadership?
Oh, guys, why are you asking such good questions? It's like you do podcasts.
That's my job.
Just like you've done this. I do write about that a little bit in my book when I talk about siblings forever changed. I have a chapter called that. And interestingly enough, this was interesting to me when I researched it, Mel. They say that most siblings who grew up with a child with special needs usually don't go into work that deals with special education or advocacy. They usually don't. So we didn't. I think, and they, again, it depends on who you read and what researcher, but some researchers say, you've spent 18 or more years with that individual. You've done a lot of work and have given part of your life to helping somebody with a special need. And so they say it's not uncommon for siblings to not go into that as a profession. I think how Steve probably helped shape my first career choice. I became a minister. I went to seminary, got my degree in theology, became a pastor. And faith was important to our family growing up. When my dad went through his personal revival, that's what I call it, I was age 10 and Steve was about 17, and that's when we first started going to church. Church became very precious and important to us, and our faith did. And Steve was, again, just a remarkable, faithful person in terms of his belief system. And that did help influence me. So in my first career as a minister, then later, after about 10 years, I changed careers and went into higher education. And I call that a ministry too, as I'm trying to help young people further their education and pursue their career paths. Steve did influence that for me. And in terms of leadership too, I mean, one of the really cool things about Steve, if you had known him, Again, every special needs child is different. But Steve didn't always just sit back and be passive. If you gave Steve an opportunity, he kind of wanted to take over. you know, he's for whatever beautiful reason, he saw himself as kind of a leader. I think some of that came from Boy Scouts. We had two wonderful Boy Scout leaders that gave Steve an opportunity to lead and do things, right? And when he had his first job as a custodian at a hospital, and he kept that job for 33 years until his dying day. I mean, he was hit on his bicycle going to work again after 33 years. His boss, God bless him, saw something in Steve, and he ended up over the years using Steve as somebody who was training the new custodians that they were hiring. And I saw that in Steve. So what I saw in Steve was somebody who wasn't afraid to try. If you gave him the chance, he would give it his all. That absolutely influenced me. And I think it helped me believe in myself and have my own sense of confidence. Because Steve, and I knew he had special needs, but he wasn't afraid to try and to try to lead and to do things with gusto. He was a terrible golfer, but he tried to hit that ball. Heck, all of us are terrible golfers, probably.
I can tell you a golf story, but we'll talk about some things after we get off.
Yeah.
My one and only attempt at golf.
Our golf ventures were always fun. My father, as adults, Dad would take us, Steve, Scott, and me out to play golf, and that's where we broke out the cigars. And that's where Steve's language became colorful when he wasn't hitting the ball. Well, we had some fun times and some fun stories. And my mom did not appreciate either the colorful language or finding out later that we had cigars. And Steve enjoyed a cigar every now and then. He just did.
You
no
were just
harm,
a terrible
no foul.
influence on Steve, weren't you?
I know, we really were. I think we really were.
All right. So if Steve were here today to see the impact his life is having on readers, what do you think he would be the most proud of?
Yeah, that's. I've had that question. Somebody asked me, what would Steve think about the book? I know you didn't ask it that way, but honestly, Steve had a sarcastic sense of humor. Very sarcastic, very dry, but fun. You had to know that to know when to laugh. If you showed this book to Steve right now in heaven, Steve would say, well, that's a waste of paper. And he would stutter, and you have to listen carefully to hear him say it. But he said, that's a waste of paper. He was very humble that way. I think Steve would be, I think he'd be happy, and I do think he'd be proud just simply knowing that here's another message about his life, and it represents the lives of millions of people who had and do have special needs, and trying to open doors for them. Steve would be happy about that, because a lot of doors were shut for Steve during that time he grew up. And my parents had to knock and knock again and kind of kick it open sometimes, especially with education, especially the chapter where I talk about his educational journey. My parents had to kick open some doors to get Stephen seen and to let educators give him a chance. Because again, special education, it was pretty much non-existent. But Steve did get an education. So I think Steve would be proud of knowing that we're still opening doors. I think he'd be proud, Mel, that since his time and up to the time of today, there's a lot more open doors for people with special needs. But we haven't arrived yet. Still too many doors get closed. And we got to keep pushing those doors open with love and persistence. And persistence, for sure.
All right. So I just have a couple questions left as we start to wind down. So after somebody finishes reading your book, what call to action would you have for them to do to start doing tomorrow to change how they think about this issue?
Part of how I describe my book in the simplest of terms is it's a mirror, it's a memorial, and it's a movement. Part of what I hope readers will come away with, number one, is the mirror. They've got to take a good look at themselves and identify what prejudices do they have against those with disability. Why, if they are, why are they uncomfortable? Why do they judge so quickly and dismiss so quickly? I'm holding up a mirror through the book and challenging everybody to take a look at yourself, number one. Number two, the book's a memorial. Obviously, I want to give a wonderful tribute to my family and my brother, Stephen, and the book does that. Lastly, it is a movement, Mel, because I hope readers will walk away from the book, and I know that they are, because the reviews on Amazon are telling me this, and it blesses my heart when I see that people are saying, it changed the way I'm thinking, it will change the way I'm acting and how I see those with disabilities, and it's going to change the way I live the rest of my life. And that sounds corny, but when writers are saying it, it's true. And they didn't have to say it. One person said it's rewired the way I'm thinking now and the way I'm going to act. So I want it to be a movement. If people are willing, if they are, to simply get involved in any local organization who advocates for the disabled. It can be as simple as giving a donation to sponsor an event like Special Olympics, or there's so many worthy organizations. Dancing with the Stars is something here locally where these wonderful adults get together and put on a dance show. And it's just so wonderful. Supporting those kinds of things that allow those with disabilities to live a richer, fuller, happier life where they feel included and they feel as though they belong. If you can do anything that does that for another human being, you've made a difference and you should feel good. Doesn't have to be big and grandiose. I don't have $1 million. If I did, I'd give a grandiose gift to somebody. It can be the little things. All the little things adding up make a big difference collectively. So I hope people will see the mirror in themselves, appreciate the memorial given to Steve's life, and see it in others. And lastly, be part of a movement that makes a difference in the lives of special needs people.
Okay. And as a final question today, what's next for you?
What's next for me? People have asked me, you're going to write another book. And I don't know if I've got it in me right now. This is a season of my life where I just want to do advocacy in the time that God gives me that's left. But for me, I'm living my passions right now. Not that my career wasn't my passion. I loved my career in ministry, loved my career in higher education as a vice president. But I'm also pursuing other things right now. I'm still teaching. I'm teaching for a university's program online. That's fun to me. I substitute at the high school because there's a big need for substitute teachers to fill in at the local high school. And I'm working with advocacy groups because that's important to me. And I think the most important thing going forward, Mel, for me, I am filling pulpits as a minister, as an ordained pastor. I still get calls. I'm filling pulpits on Sundays where there's an absentee of a pastor who's gone, or a church without a pastor. But I want to just keep going around as I am tomorrow. I'm going to be on a college campus tomorrow and at a library tomorrow night, doing what I get to do with you, Mel, which is just sharing the good news about the wonderful human beings that we too often dismiss and marginalize. That's what I want to do with the remainder of my days, is spread that message as best as I can. Thank you, Mel, for giving me that platform. I'm giving you a virtual hug right now, whether you ask for it or not.
I'll accept it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
And that's a great way to start to wind down today. So our guest today has been Stephen Jones's brother, Dr. Stuart Jones.
Thank you.
Stuart, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for listeners who want to know more about Stuart's incredible story of his brother Stephen, there will be links in to his website and to his book in the show notes. Make sure you pick up a copy of the book. That's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Until next time, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
Amen.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.